Hi, this is Melissa Yi, also known as emergency physician Dr. Melissa Ewan Ennis. This is an imagination online video. Welcome to my world. So I'm going to show you Code Blues, which is the first book in the series, and I'm going to read you a little bit from each of them, just to give you a taste. I pictured the city of Montreal as a woman with bleached blonde hair and a generous, lopsided bosom, who would draw me into her perfumed embrace and whisper, "Bienvenue." Instead, I found a skinny brunette with a cigarette jammed in the corner of her mouth who turned around and bitch slapped me. At least, that's what it felt like, even before I got mixed up with murder. So, spoiler alert, Hope does survive the first book and the first murderer, and woohoo! Notorious DOC is the second book. Each book has a different rotation that she's on and a different crime that she's solving. It follows the same character, but you can jump in as long as you don't mind learning about the characters' relationships and seeing how they change. In this case, she's on psychiatry now, and she thinks this is going to be easy. It's supposed to be a nice rotation. You get to sleep and do home call, which means you take phone calls at home instead of having to be at the hospital 24 hours a day. So it should be easy, right? But of course it's not. And so her very first day on the psychiatry rotation, she goes to introduce herself to the first patient. "My name is Dr. Hope Sze. I'm a resident from psychiatry. Could we..." She stared at me with such intensity, I faltered. Her eyes filled with tears. Oh dear, she really was depressed. The psychiatric patients who come to the emergency room are usually depressed or psychotic. I set her file down on the desk and scanned the room for tissues. They always kept a box handy on psych. She said something in Chinese. "I'm sorry, I don't speak Chinese, but I could get a translator if you like. My parents thought we should be Canadian and always spoke English to us." Mrs. Lee reached a hand toward my face, gazing at me like she was in a dream. I flinched, not wanting to jerk away, but mildly freaked. Who was this woman? She checked herself. Her hand dropped to her side, and she tried to smile. "Excuse me," she said in perfectly good English. "It's just that you look so much like my daughter." I relaxed a little. "Oh, that's nice. Is your daughter, here with you?" "Not anymore." Her brown eyes met mine. "She's dead. Somebody killed her." Dun 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 dun! Okay, so that's Notorious DOC, the second book. All right, book 3. So this one was really a departure because it's the first book in the series that's outside the hospital. In this case, I was listening to CBC. Sook-Hyun Lee was interviewing an escape artist named Dean Gunnarsson, a Canadian escape artist who talked about how he had asked his fans to chain and nail himself in a coffin and lower him into Winnipeg's Red River. He was 19. He was trying to imitate Harry Houdini, and he didn't get out. They ended up having to resuscitate him. He almost died, but he made it. He is cognitively intact, and he ended up doing the escape again successfully against his mother's wishes. And he makes his living now as an escape artist. He's one of the world's top escape artists. So when I heard that story, I was just like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I want to write that story, but in Montreal, and have Hope resuscitate him. And I want it to be that somebody sabotaged his stunt, and that's why he couldn't get out. So I wrote to Dean Gunnarsson, and I said, would that be okay? And he said, yes. So this book is dedicated to him because he gave permission for that. And I do love the opening quote for Terminally Ill, which is, "Nobody wants to see a man die, but everybody wants to be there when it happens. Harry Houdini." I think it's just perfect, right? Prologue. His breath whistled inside the coffin. He heard the crowd cheering, although the plywood walls surrounding him dampened their yells. He could hear and feel the rumble of the crane lifting him and the coffin into the air. He started to undo the chains on his wrists. Usually those were the easiest. He slid his wrists inward to gain a little slack, then twisted them to pop his wrists free. The chains tightened on his wrists instead. The fourth book was inspired by a real-life incident on one of my night shifts. Bref, what happened was that the police brought in a prisoner to be assessed, which is not uncommon. But in this case, what was unusual was that the prisoner escaped, and I tried to find him. And I actually did help figure out where he had gone. But it was not a smart thing to do to chase after an escaped prisoner, I realized afterwards. And when I looked up what had happened in hostage situations in hospital, they were terrible stories. And a real story was in Utah, where a man broke into the obstetrics ward with 2 guns and dynamite and took a woman in labor hostage. So the 4th book, Stockholm Syndrome, is really a change for the whole series in that this is really where they become a thriller. The first 3 are mysteries and they're more lighthearted, but the 4th one, as you can imagine, with a hostage taking, is the transition to something much darker. As you can probably see the tagline, 2 doctors, 1 killer, 1 woman in labor. So that just kind of sums up what this one's all about. It's still funny because Hope is always joking around, but really with an edge to it. Birth smells. I'm not saying it stinks. Well, to some people it does. I remember the classmate who finished our med school OB-GYN rotation without ever delivering an infant. He delivered half of the head, and then the look on his face was so horrid that the obstetrician delivered the rest of the baby. I've got a stronger stomach than that classmate, but when I stepped into the delivery room at Montreal's St. Joseph Hospital, it only smelled like sweat and a little blood. The odors would grow more intense once the amniotic fluid broke and the afterbirth emerged, but for now, I didn't hold my breath. My eyes adjusted to the darkness. The nurse had turned the lights off, except a small fluorescent lamp beside the bed. The baby's heartbeat chugged along on the fetal monitor. Whomp, 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 at 162 beats per minute. Most of obstetrics is nice and normal. Even our C-sections tend towards planned events instead of crash ORs. They screen out congenital abnormalities at our small Canadian community center. This is the only happy area of the hospital, an obstetrician told me on my first day. Everybody's smiling. The black woman laboring in bed wasn't smiling. She was sweating, which made sense. That's why they call it labor, the nurse often says, while the woman recovers from the latest contraction. That's normal too. So I was pretty surprised when my obstetrics rotation transformed into a bone-chilling bloodbath. So the 5th book in the series is Human Remains. And this one is a challenge because after the hostage taking in Stockholm Syndrome, she has post-traumatic stress disorder and she's not as fun anymore, you know. She's grieving, which just means that she seems very frozen. So in practice for me as an author, it was tough for me to write about a character who wouldn't be as engaging. And when you write women characters, a lot of the time people complain, well, I didn't like her, as if that's supposed to be the defining characteristic of a woman. What I ended up doing was I introduced a dog. I thought it might be fun for you guys if you ended up meeting the inspiration, who was our dog named Roxy. So pardon the mess, but Roxy came inside with me. She's a Rottweiler, and if it's dark out, you just can't see her. That's my daughter petting her, actually. Hi, Anastasia.
Hi.
You love Roxy. She's so cute. Okay. So I'm going to read a little bit, and we're going to look at Roxy this time. Intelligence plus character. That is the goal of true education. Martin Luther King Jr. Kill one man, and you are a murderer. Kill millions of men, and you are a conqueror. Kill them all, and you are a god. Jean Rastin, Thoughts of a Biologist. Chapter 1, Sunday. Even if the terrorists don't win, they can make your life an icy hell. Okay. Death Flight. So this one is fun because Obviously, we're no longer at the hospital, we're on an airplane. And I love the idea of writing a thriller in a closed space where nobody can escape. So you know the killer has to be on that plane, but who is it? So the challenge is for me to introduce a bunch of different characters and a bunch of different events, and you have to figure out what's real and what's important and what's not, if you want to solve it. The danger? But danger is one of the attractions of flight. John Cano, 1911. Fighting in the air is not sport. It is scientific murder. Captain Eddie Rickenbacker, fighting the flying circus. Fight on and fly on, to the last drop of blood and the last drop of fuel, to the last beat of the heart. Baron Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron. I figured Los Angeles would be full of Botox, Brazilian wax blondes honking their BMWs through the smog, but I was surprised by how much it seemed like any other city, until it launched me directly into hell at 35,000 feet. My name is Hope Sze. I'm a resident doctor who ends up mano a mano with murderers way too often, but right now I was on a different mission, a Christmas mission. I was here to surprise Dr. John Tucker. Death Flight, which was actually the reason that the Imagination Writers Festival invited me. So thank you very much for whoever enjoyed Death Flight so much that you invited me to the conference. And now, just as you're saying, how many books are in this series? There are 7 full novels, and this is the latest release, Graveyard Shift. This one was inspired by a few different things. One of the local police officers told me about a case that he had in real life about a theft at the hospital that he had thwarted, and that was so awesome that I wanted to write about that. But the problem is there's often only one physician, you're all by yourself, you have almost no tests. I mean, you might have lab and x-ray. I work at a very small hospital now that doesn't have those things in the middle of the night. So it can be really scary on a night shift, as well as just being sleep deprived. So I knew that when I threw Hope into a graveyard shift, it was going to be pretty hideous, and it is, in a good way, because it's always fun to read about those things rather than experience them, so then you'll be prepared when you actually meet the real thing. And the opening quotes are extremely appropriate right now. Hospitals are only an intermediate stage of civilization, never intended at all to take in the whole sick population. Florence Nightingale. A hospital alone shows what war is. Eric Maria Remarque. That's the end of my reading. I hope you really enjoyed it. And now I'm going to conclude with 3 questions from the audience.
You write fantastic medical thrillers.
Thank you.
Given that COVID-19 feels a bit like a medical thriller, do you think you'd ever write a book about a pandemic?
2 other people asked me that too, and I have to say, yes, I am going to for sure write about this pandemic, but a little bit later, because right now it's not entertaining because we have to fight our way through it. I'm also in the middle of finishing the 8th Hope book, which is set in Egypt, and I have the pieces, I just need to put them together. So that'll come first, and it'll be a little bit more fun, and ideally in 2021 or 2022, we'll be more in the mood for reading about COVID-19.
As an emergency physician, how much inspiration do you take from your day job to put into your writing?
I feel lucky that I have such an inspiring day and night job. I never know what's going to happen. I never know if I'm going to see a cold or a heart attack. Every day is different. Every night is completely on its head. So if you don't like randomness, you won't like it. But if you do like change and excitement, then it's a really good job to inspire different stories for writing and for life.
You write novel series.
and short stories. Which one do you prefer writing?
And why?
They exercise different parts of my brain, so I like them for different reasons. Short stories are very satisfying because if you want to try on a new world or a new character or a new genre, like I also write science fiction and fantasy and romance and kids stories and that sort of thing. Yes, my daughter says like Max's Magic Hat. So I write all sorts of things, and a short form is a really great way to experiment and to get your voice out there in different magazines, and to build a new audience. So I highly recommend that. And then novels are great if you want to immerse yourself into a world. You know, if you just think 1,000, 3,000, 6,000 words aren't enough, I really need to explore this. I wouldn't have expected, for example, that Hope would stretch out to 7 and now getting on 8 novels. But I'm not finished. What's that, Anastasia? She asked if Hope Sze was a short story. No, I have written short stories with Hope in them, but she started off as a novel, but I only meant to write 3. I was going to write a trilogy. So to have her expand and more than double and probably more than triple that has been pretty exciting, and I really enjoy it. If anybody's a writer out there, I think the best thing is the freedom that you have in writing. You might not get rich and famous at it, but you can really enjoy exploring new worlds, so I highly encourage it. What's that, Anastasia? Unless you're J.K. Rowling, and then you will just clean up and be one of the richest people in the world, so good on you. Let's all hope for that. This is my daughter, Anastasia.
And the doctor.
Yes, Dr. Roxy. See you next time.
Wolf.